Welcome to Let's Talk Bayfront, a lunchtime chat about the transportation projects happening along the Bayfront Parkway in the city of Erie. I'm your host, Jill Harry, the press officer and community relations coordinator for the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation's Northwest region. The Bayfront Parkway is an important corridor for residents, commuters, and visitors. It is used by thousands of drivers every day, as well as hundreds of pedestrians and cyclists. Recognizing how instrumental the road is to the quality of life and future prosperity of the city and the region, PennDOT has partnered with various groups to identify and design improvements in different areas of the parkway. Most notable among them is the Central Corridor Project, which is an extensive plan to improve accessibility, safety, and efficiency along the parkway from Sassafras to Holland. For today's episode, we have members of PennDOT's construction team who will give an update on what work is currently happening within the Central Corridor and what traffic changes drivers should anticipate over the coming days and weeks. But before we dive into our discussion, a reminder for those listening live. You can submit questions throughout the program by using the Q&A chat box feature. As time allows, we will get to many of those questions on today's topic as we can. You can also turn on captions by clicking on the three dots near the top of your screen, then choosing language and speech in the drop-down box and turn on live captions. Now to focus on today's conversation, we welcome back to the show Justin Baker and Doug Fry. Welcome, guys.
Hey, Jill, how you doing?
There you go. I know you guys have both been guests before, but some of our listeners might be on for the first time, so we'll start out by doing some quick introductions. Justin, do you want to go ahead and go first?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Justin Baker. I'm the project manager with PennDOT for the project, and I guess I started off as an intern with PennDOT in 2006, and have been working either as a consultant or more recently, and for quite a duration, directly with PennDOT. And yeah, that's about it.
And how about you, Doug?
Doug Fry. I'm the senior ace for our district. I'm in charge of the bigger projects. I'm the ace for all three of the Bayfront projects up here. Been with PennDOT for 28 years. I too started as a intern a few years before Justin, but been with the department since 1998.
So a little plug for our internship program, huh?
Yeah.
Because I was also started as an intern, so maybe somebody listening, you can share that with your college students in your life, that our internships oftentimes can lead to full-time employment down the road. So, but we'll focus on the Bayfront from here on out. Okay. So it was an interesting summer down at the Bayfront, I'm sure. So I thought it might be helpful if we actually backtrack a little, and maybe Justin can give us an update on everything that you've accomplished down there so far this construction season.
Yeah, so it's certainly been an eventful year, and we've gotten some substantial work completed. To start off, like with Sassafras, we placed all the underground drainage and utility relocations in what was the former GAF site. And we've completed the northern portion of the roundabout at Sassafras, at least insofar as it's completed for this stage. We completed the majority of the underground relocations on the north side of Holland, which will allow us to progress our efforts down there as well. Additionally, the first stage of the northernmost retaining wall, which is adjacent to Front Street, it's also been completed, which will allow for our traffic switch and ultimately enable us to continue our efforts adjacent to State Street.
So I'm going to ask it this way. If we were down there taking a tour of the project today, what kind of work would we see happening right now?
Well, today actually looks like progress from a layman's perspective. We're paving currently. We're placing the temporary asphalt from Sassafras to just west of State Street, which again will allow for our traffic switch. We're also finishing the western half of the underground electric and communication relocations, which have to be completed prior to the major State Street work commencing. And we're also continuing the utility relocation efforts at Holland, and pretty much working in all corners of the project.
That sounds like a lot of work to manage and keep track of and get done. So I know not everyone is familiar with the way our projects work, and they look at those machines that are down there paving now, and they say to themselves, there's PennDOT's doing this and PennDOT's doing that, but maybe they aren't familiar about how PennDOT actually works on behalf of the taxpayers. So maybe could one of you or both of you give us a rundown of who actually completes physical work on a construction project like this, and what is PennDOT's role in the project?
Yeah, so projects are, I guess, conceived, designed, and then let by the department. Sometimes we have consultants design them, but once a project is let, it opens the door for private contractors to bid on them. So once the project's awarded, PennDOT retains oversight, and our role is truly to ensure that the contractor completes all the work safely and in accordance with our specification, and also ensures that the Commonwealth's interests are met.
Yeah, we also do a lot with overseeing the quality control and quality assurance, that we're getting what we paid for. The contractor's getting paid for what they do. Of course, we have a budget to stay within, so we monitor the budget, and try and work within the constraints that we're given.
So if I had to sum it up, would this be correct? It is private entities that do the physical work, and it's PennDOT's role to make sure it's done correctly within budget and meets, the specifications given.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay. So I just thought it would be helpful to people to understand, sometimes that it's not our workers down there. These are a lot of crews from sometimes a lot of different groups, right? Like we have consultants, but we have contractors, we have subcontractors. So it's a lot of groups working together to pull off a project this large. So that has to be complicated, but what is the hardest part of the project this large with that many groups involved?
For me, and I think you've alluded to it, it's really just communication. You got to communicate with all the necessary parties. It's the most critical component of the project. There's just far too much going on at any given time for any one person to cover. I mean, so work has to be delegated, and great communication needs to occur to ensure that all pieces of the puzzle are accounted for and to ensure everything's being completed safely and efficiently.
And I think to add to that, on this project so far, I think one of the hardest parts has been coordination. I mean, we've had some things that haven't gone according to plan. We've had to work on plan B and plan C, and with that, we had to do a lot of coordination with the utility companies that were affected. And it goes back to, like Justin said, I mean, communication is a huge part of that, but coordinating with outside entities has been a big factor in where we're at on this project.
So that's kind of flows into my next question, which is like about the work that you mentioned, Justin. A lot of it, and the stuff that Doug was just talking about, all of that is happening near the Parkway, but not necessarily on the road itself. And it sounds like that is changing. Maybe today is one of those days where it's kind of changed and people are seeing work on the Parkway itself. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, the footprint of this project is expanding the Bayfront Parkway. So essentially, the project was set up to do what is the northernmost leg first, which is north of where the original footprint was. So while that kind of work has been taking place sort of off the Parkway, if you will, as we move forward, I mean, aside from short-term operations at State Street, the impact to the public will remain pretty similar to what it was all year. We'll still basically be maintaining the same number of through and turn lanes throughout the corridor, and our design is set up to continue to work sort of offline by shifting traffic onto recently completed portions of the project. So we're constantly juggling the traffic and the work in order to accommodate everybody's interests.
So at Sassafras, same amount of lanes of traffic, just slightly different spot where you're going to be driving for a little while as we finish up the roundabout. Sounds like it won't be super complicated, but it's going to look different.
Yeah, will certainly look different, and we're going to hopefully disseminate an overhead of kind of what to expect, and it's still pretty straightforward. You will be kind of utilizing a roundabout, although you're just sort of utilizing it like a normal roadway. The east and west traffic will flow right beside each other, and you just go around the north part of the circle.
So as I understand it, there's also going to be some significant impacts down at State Street in the near future. Can you explain those a little bit, Justin?
Yeah, so in order to progress the project at State Street, the underground utilities need to be relocated underneath. And you may not realize it riding by that intersection, but if you're traveling east to west across the Parkway, you're substantially higher than the elevation of the adjacent properties north of the Parkway. Our future work requires us to go roughly 15 feet or so deeper than that even. So when you piece that all together, we're in the neighborhood of 30 feet below grade to place these conduits. And there's no safe way to maintain traffic while we're excavating to those depths and volumes, which necessitates a closure of State Street for a period of time from the Bayfront Parkway north to Front Street.
So oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and when that work's being done, a detour route will be implemented. And fortunately, you know, with the Front Street project being completed ahead of this, which of course was the plan, the impact is going to be, you know, manageable by detouring people down around Holland and back up around. And while we're doing that, of course, Sassafras and Front Street will be open in their entirety.
You beat me to it. That's was going to be my question. So work happening way under State Street will require a closure for a brief period of time, but it will be minimal in the detour length itself.
Yeah, that's correct.
Weather is, of course, on everybody's mind as it is getting cooler at night, even if we are seeing some warmer temperatures during the day. How does this change in temperature affect the project?
I mean, as a broad statement, everything becomes more difficult. You generally experience wetter conditions, which is problematic. Asphalt plants close down, and even concrete placement requires heat and or protection to place. And then snow, of course, even further exacerbates the problem. I mean, you know, just imagine trying to garden in a foot of snow. You know, it's as difficult for us to work as it is for everybody else.
Does the project continue through the winter, or is there a winter shutdown like we have with some of these projects that go across multiple years?
So with the work that we have available to us, you're obviously not going to try to pave through the winter, but there are opportunities to continue to work effectively through the winter, and we're going to pursue those. You'll see a lot of offline work going on down around Holland and east of that. And potentially some drainage work down along the south side of the Parkway, also east of Holland. So we're exploring with the contractor every avenue that we can to continue to do productive work through the winter, which only further helps us in regaining some of our schedule concerns and trying to do everything we can to stay as on track as possible.
So hope for a mild winter, work as you can.
Absolutely.
Yep. Before we run out of time, Doug, I wanted to ask you about the other two Bayfront projects because you oversee those as well. Those who are listening now, maybe you also listened to the last episode where Doug and Ed gave us great details on the Cranberry Street project. And if you're listening and you haven't listened to that episode yet, I would really encourage you to, because Ed gave great explanation of how that new signal up there at Cranberry Street, how it's going to operate, how drivers will use it, and also emergency services. So it's listed on our Bayfront project page where we have a subsection just for Let's Talk Bayfront. So you can go on there at PennDOT.pa.gov/Bayfront Parkway Project. And then you can look for the Let's Talk Bayfront section and you can find the episode there, or you can also link to it through our Facebook group. So before I ask any questions about Cranberry Street, I just wanted to remind everybody you can go on there and listen to that episode because it really is a great detailed explanation of that traffic signal that's coming to the Cranberry Street intersection. So with that sales pitch away, Doug, I'll come back to you and say, could you give us an update on what's happening down there at Cranberry Street, and then, you know, what's happening over on the east side as well?
Sure. Yeah, starting with Cranberry, the foundations for signal poles are all in, the conduits are run. Most of the sidewalk and EDA ramps are in. There are two on the north side that are in conflict with the existing poles that are there, so we can't we can't get the ADA ramps in until the new poles are up, so we can remove the old poles to get the new sidewalk and ADA ramps in there. So there'll be a little bit more work there. Let's see, the pavement on Cranberry Street was done. Pavement markings, they cut that bank back, put the sidewalk in that area as well. And we have a meeting tomorrow with the contractor to find out about the delivery of the poles. It's kind of been a bit of a concern from the start of the project with supplies and materials. We've been seeing a delay in that and tried to get an answer before the meeting. I was unable to do that, but we do have a meeting tomorrow to see when those poles will be delivered. Once those poles are delivered, we probably have week and a half to 2 weeks worth of work getting the poles up, getting all the wire pulled, setting the cabinet, and then getting the signals turned on, and then we have a 30-day test. So if the poles are delivered here in the next week or so, we should be on schedule. If that's an issue, then we're kind of at the mercy of delivery of the poles on that project. On the east side project, pretty much everything's finished up. The pavement was placed. There was a Nova chip was placed over the existing concrete. That was done. Sawing, sealing was done. The islands in the middle have been in for a while now. Basically, on that project, we're just finishing up the pavement markings, and the signal contractor is working on updating the signals and some signing on that project.
So almost done on the east side, and Cranberry holding pattern while we work through some industry-wide supply issues with poles.
Correct.
Yeah. So it sounds like everything's still staying pretty busy on the Bayfront. So I'm going to take a moment just to remind everybody who's listening that with all of that activity means that there's workers engaged in different processes throughout that area. So, make sure that when you travel on the Bayfront, you're aware that there could be temporary work zones set up. There's traffic pattern changes coming around Sassafras, eventually over at State Street as well. So we just ask everyone to continue to exercise patience when you drive through that area. And remember that just because winter feels like sometimes it's looming over us, especially at night, that we're still actively working as much as possible. So construction season is not over on the Bayfront. So thank you, Justin and Doug, for coming and giving us all of these updates and letting everybody know what's happening down there. Thank you to everyone who joined us today for the live episode and for those who are listening to the recording. As Justin said, the project continues through the winter as weather permits, so we will be planning our next episode of Let's Talk Bayfront accordingly. So as we have updates to give, we will plan another episode. So we'll announce that episode on the Facebook group, in our regional X account, which is 511 PA Erie, as well as on the project page. And just a reminder, that is PennDOT.pa.gov/Bayfront Parkway Project. In the coming days, this episode will be posted on the website as well, alongside all of those episodes from earlier this year, so you can go and listen on demand. And in the meantime, if you have any questions about the Bayfront projects, or if you would like to suggest a topic for future episode of Let's Talk Bayfront, you can do so through email. So the address is bayfrontproject@pa.gov. So thank you again, Justin and Doug. And thank you, Stephanie, for producing today's episode. Everyone have a great afternoon.